Welcome to the Throttle Up podcast, a behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to build and launch a new class of rocket propulsion. Hosted by Sascha Deri, founder and CEO of bluShift Aerospace, and storyteller and entrepreneur Justin Starbird. This podcast follows the real work behind the mission. From early design and propulsion development to testing, capital, partnerships, and the path to launch, each episode brings you inside the process as it unfolds. This is your front row seat to watching bluShift Aerospace take off.
Welcome back to the Throttle Up podcast. My name is Justin Starbird, and as always, I get to do this show with CEO and founder of bluShift Aerospace, Sascha Deri. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Justin. Looking forward to it.
This is a cool one. I mean, we got kicked off last week or 2 weeks ago with more about the company, what it is we do, what makes us better, unique, different. Today is pretty interesting because we get to talk about some more historical stuff, but also give folks a perspective on how we've actually been able to get here. And it's been through some incredible partnerships and investments through partners that have given us the opportunity to test, iterate, try again, and ultimately, keep going. So I'm really looking forward to your perspective on this.
Thank you. I'm really, some of these insights I think are going to be for other entrepreneurs are they're understand the challenges and pains we go through, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of the insights that we've gained and some of the unbelievable advancements we've made since our start about a decade ago.
Yeah. No overnight success happens overnight, of course. And it's taken countless, days, weeks, months, years at this point to get where you are. So I want to take the watchers, the listeners back to some of the earliest raises and the goals that we had initially set. What were the first critical milestones that you set that capital actually allowed bluShift to achieve?
Yeah, before we started fundraising, the major milestone for us was developing under a NASA grant or SBIR our engine, the Marvel engine. So it was a smaller prototype. Actually, much of it lies right behind me, and it was because of that, and then the launch of Stardust that we did about 9 months after we wrapped up that contract, that we had hundreds of people asked to invest in us, and that's when we turned our eyes to equity crowdfunding at the time, and we ultimately raised over 1.4 million at the over that period. And the things it allowed us to do were incredible. We had that time pivoted from having a small prototype capability that was meant for research, and we made a strategic decision to instead scale the engine up to what we'd always planned for. It was meant to be an engine that could serve as a orbital capable engine, but also one that could be used just one at a time for very capable suborbital research, competing with Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin. So that 1.4 million that we got in early days allowed us to do what I understand from talking to investors that are in the Southwest and the West Coast, what some of our competition couldn't do with $10 to $20 million. We built a pretty magnificent test stand capability, allowing us to test engines up to 50,000 pounds of thrust. We built a vertical test chamber that allows us to house not only our oxidizer, but also ultimately to allow us to do vertical engine tests and add new engineers to our team, move our site from a gritty garage on this former Naval Air Station to a hangar, which is where we are right now, to doing some incredible analysis that really has enabled us to scale the engine from a 1-ton thrust capable machine to a 20-ton capable thrust machine that burns for just over a minute. And as I mentioned in the previous podcast, we're going to, in this year, we're going to be doubling that capability, doubling that thrust by up to 40,000 pounds, which really enables us to enter even more markets than we were planning before.
I mean, it's incredible. It's inspiring to hear, what you've been able to do so far. And I think one of the things that is so interesting is for people outside of the industry, the aerospace industry, how difficult it is to understand how expensive and time intensive propulsion development actually can be. Where did those early dollars actually go? And, why were those investments necessary? And, I guess by extension, how were you able to turn that 1.4 into something that companies with, $50 million haven't been able to do?
I mean, for one thing, it wasn't just 1.4 because we leveraged that investment to with non-dilutive funding, direct to phase two SBIR contract from the Space Force to develop the full-size Marvel engine, and then a follow-on, what's called a TAC-5 from the United States Air Force to enhance its ability to serve as a booster, which was sort of a precedent to where we are right now, which is we are now very much focused on the booster market. So if you look at all that, to date, we between non-dilutive capital and the investments we've taken in from early days investments back in 2021 to today, we've raised about $7 million between the non-dilutive and private capital, about 50-50 mix. And I think, obviously I'm a bit biased here, but I think it's not far off to say that for similar capability, solid rocket motor, and especially a liquid rocket engine, you would be looking at least 40 to $60 million in capital to get to that point where you've developed an engine, you've tested it, demonstrated its capability at this thrust level. So why does it cost so much in the first place? Like, yes, we're significantly lower capex than other forms of propulsion, but what fundamentally makes it different is if you look at the solid rocket motor world, the issue there is explosivity. We deal with things that are effectively bombs. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with something that has a TNT potential? You've got to make sure your folks are safe. So it's okay when you're doing like hobbyist level, making small little rocket motors. But when you're doing something that has a consequence of potentially taking out a whole building, that inherently means your infrastructure has to be exquisitely designed to prevent any accident and to prevent, if there is an accident, from it taking out the entire company or building.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. So safety is another factor. But when you look at like liquid rocket engines, that's really interesting because they are such an exquisite piece of machinery and require so much design that you often can't have one engineer that can fathom in their brain how to design every element and actually do that. In the case of hybrid rocket engines, the simplicity element not only goes into like the safety aspect and how we can simply, we don't need the safety suits, or we don't need, we don't have to worry about cryogenics. We don't have to worry about caustic oxidizers, things like that. It enables you to work in a very manageable way any time of the year. And that fundamentally changes the cost structure. But when you look at liquid fuel rocket engines, one of the things that makes them so different is that because of that complexity, you often need a whole team of engineers. We were looking to hire some additional folks a year or two ago, as we are today, as a propulsion engineer. And what we were finding over and over again is when we were interviewing candidates that have experience in liquid rocket propulsion, is when they've had relevant experience with other commercial companies, they get to work on just one component of a really complex engine. And I compare that with our team where, a very small set of people is involved with designing the engine. And truly any one person understands how the full engine works, even in some of our most complex portions of our engine. And so that's my really long-winded way of saying the KISS principle really drives cost effectiveness. The KISS principle, when it comes to safety, can really drive cost effectiveness. And that's why, we've at the core of it, uh, you know, the capital expenditures, the manpower that we need is it probably an order of magnitude less than what we're most used to seeing, whether it's the SpaceXs of the world or the solid rocket motor companies of the world.
And the output and the reason for that is a little bit unique too. So, you're not solving some of the same challenges, of course. And when this capital came in, whether it was the non-dilutive funding or the investment capital, was there a moment where you realized like, oh wow, we actually can do this based on what you had done for budgeting, based on what you had asked for, then what you had actually received from people that and organizations that believed in you. Was there a moment where you're like, holy smokes, we're actually going to do this?
I think as an entrepreneur, you always have that anxiety of hitting the next milestone, the sort of lack of satisfaction of where you are, and probably only that brief moment in time where you like that the hurrah, which the whole team has, and then it's like hours later, you're just back at it. But I think the closest moment to that, or the most intense moment, was um, probably two engine tests ago, when when we the engine performed to such a degree that if we had launched it, if we had flown the lightweight version of that engine, we knew that it would make it to space. It would make it to suborbital space. And that was a really key milestone that we had been working towards for years. Um, so that was one. And that was made all possible by investors and by our federal government, and even some of our state organizations. So yeah, I'd love to say there was like an epiphany where like, oh yeah, this is it, we've done it. But it's like, I think the angst of being an entrepreneur is continual.
Yeah. It does give you a neat roadmap, though, so to speak, because you get to an engine test, you take the data and the information that comes back, and you're like, okay, well, now we can see how to get to this point and turn that into not just the next test, but it shows the advancements that you can also add on to that test to continue to prove out that. So at this point, if there, capital comes in, you've continued to show that you're a great steward of where that money goes and why. What is that feeling like when you come back and you can actually show that roadmap to, potential investors?
Yeah. Well, I think the best way I can show is when we have investors come and visit, um, whether it's here to this hangar or the test site down the runway. Um, they are blown away of what we've built and the capability that we've created here for really low amounts of capital. Um, so that for me is like the absolute best way to demonstrate to people what we're capable of doing. And the right there at the same level, but less frequently, is when we do a full hot fire test. When you hear the power that that engine puts out, and you hear it go for a full minute, um, I don't know how to describe it, but people at a very visceral level, and I've had more than one person say this to me, now I understand what I invested in. This is incredible. And of course, what I really want to be at within the next year is hearing that sound as it's going straight up into the sky.
Yeah.
Uh, that's that's going to be the moment where I'll be jumping up and down. I think that'll be the moment where my angst can just set aside for one whole day after that.
A whole day. I mean,
Yeah, whole day. It's a long
that's
time.
that's a tall task there.
Yeah.
Have there been moments where you've recognized that you've needed to pivot from what your initial vision was or the initial vision was. And, what was the way that you communicated that?
Yeah, I guess I'll answer this question backwards. So what I've enjoyed with our, communicating with our investors since the very beginning when we've had that opportunity to talk to folks um, in our crowdfunding days after the launch of Stardust, um, was I just, I'm the type of person like just wants to kind of be sincere and upfront and real about what it is, right? The good, bad, and the ugly. And for me, for a lot of the folks that have invested in us and reinvest in us, I think they see that. I think they know that when you're developing a hardware company, you're doing hard tech, you're doing it in aerospace, it's not easy. And you'll have setbacks and you'll have successes and everything in between. And for me, the strategy is always just to communicate where we're at, what's going on, what we're doing. And for me, it's sometimes it's just a way to share what's going on, but oftentimes we will get feedback from a lot of our investors or folks who've worked in the industry one way or shape or another, or a parallel industry, and are often able to give little insights and tips on how to solve problems or places to look, or connect us with resources that we hadn't looked at before. But it's the pivot. You know, we originally got our start back in the mid-teens, right? But we really didn't get going until that NASA contract in 2019. And that's really where we gained a lot of momentum. We started hiring folks. And early days, our eyes were on launching small satellites, right? And it's a market that's tens of billions of dollars, et cetera. But what we slowly came to was the understanding that that was a big nut to jump for, and the space was crowded. Now, I just want to just defend one thing. This is I have to say, at the time there was like 140 some odd, maybe 150 some odd launch companies, and many of them have since perished, and many of them have since pivoted. But what's interesting is since when we were doing, we had our eyes on small satellite launch, there really aren't that many more companies doing small satellite launch. Maybe two are actually doing it successfully. So it is hard
Yeah.
and it would be expensive. So for me, it's difficult to balance the dream, the vision, the crazy vision where you're going to go for, with how do you tie that in with revenue generation, get to market, commercialization, and the reality of how much capital you're able to bring in. And the latter is really the litmus test. It's like,
Yeah.
here's the capital you have to work with. How do you get to commercialization with this, with where you're at? So all that whole cluster of challenges. We heard that venture capital did not want to invest in any more orbital launch companies, and learning that solid rocket motors were in short supply, and numerous people, including one of our board advisors, a space shuttle astronaut, Bill Reedy, saying, "You got to go after this market because your engine is capable of solving the same problems that those solid rocket motors take on, and you can do it for less. You can throttle all these different things that we can do. You just can't do with solid rocket motors." Um, so, like I've said in the previous podcast, none of these things are like nothing like this is none of this is intuitive. It's a hard mental challenge. It isn't like one moment you go from pivot from here to there, because if you're pivoting all the time, you're not getting anything done. It has to be for all of us. Had to be a very conscientious decision.
Well, now we have a documentation of all of it, right? We're starting a podcast to talk about some of these things.
That's true. That's true.
So we'll be able to look back and say, oh, okay, in 10 more years, like what did we do? So I think that part's kind of cool. So I mean, of course, I'm happy to be on this journey with you and the vehicle for you to be able to share that and share the story and how it's going and what's happened. And thinking about what happened previously, you also, we've talked a lot about venture backed funds that wanted to initially invest, then they scaled back or pulled back. Then you had angels that did something similar. Then you recognize that there was a potential community that you were growing, not necessarily that it was unintentional, but it wasn't the focus. And then as the community grew, you realized that there was a chance to put that community around together in 2021. And to your point earlier, you raised 1.4 million from that. What was it like to then get their feedback and hear from the person that put in $500, not necessarily 500,000 or something, and hear their excitement and listen to their enthusiasm for what you're doing.
It's just a nice positive feedback loop is what it is. Because you have people. I love talking to investors, and I've talked to them from California to our home state of Maine. And here in Brunswick, we have people who will fly in. They're taking vacation to stop by at to visit. And I don't care what level they've invested in. I just really love one, giving them tours, talking to them about what we're doing. And For me, and I know for the team, the positive feedback loop is the support we get from these investors, because the support is not only financial, it's often knowledge, but it's also about cheering us on and supporting the good, bad, and the challenging. And uh, I've I found it very, very rewarding. Uh, we've had people who've invested because they want to see a different type of propulsion system uh, come come to market, one that's more sustainable, even though sustainability is apparently out of vogue right now. Um, there are people who still care that, we aren't using toxic materials to propel our rocket. We're not using toxic oxidizer, and it just happens to be that those choices had actually may given us a financial advantage for developing and ultimately manufacturing this rocket system. And so I see people supporting us there. I see folks who have kids who were, I've already seen now cycles where people have invested in us and their students, I'm sorry, their children in high school are now in college choosing aerospace engineering and other types of engineering degrees, probably in part because of what they've seen us do here.
Yeah.
And for me, that's really inspirational here. And that's some of the feedback I get from our investors. So it's just it's a really good positive feedback loop, and it's why I really enjoy when we have open questions Q&A sessions with
Yeah.
investors. Absolutely love whatever question comes my way. It is the best.
Which I think this podcast will be out before our next webinar, which is going to be on the 20th, I believe, of May.
Okay,
So,
great.
so I think that's kind of cool. So, we'll dive into that a little bit more and hear investors and their questions, for you. So it's an investor Q&A, which is kind of cool. So when investors do look at bluShift today, what milestones or even proof points should they recognize as outcomes from capital that was previously deployed into the business?
Uh, prior to any rounds we're going to do, yeah. Um, so I mean, the biggest thing is, one, the full duration burns. The full duration, we've gone from doing. Uh, Actually, I'm going to back it up another step. So, developing an engine which you can literally carry maybe between two people, the entire propulsion system in your hand, put in the back of a Ford truck, is one thing. Um, Having a propulsion system which now needs forklifts and cranes because it is a beast. Um, I think you'll if you look out in the rocket world, you'll see there's a number of companies that develop engines that are like 2,000 pounds thrust engines, 5,000 thrust, 5,000 pound thrust engines. Uh, Once you kind of get to this scale, this sort of engine level, um, it becomes often not only a mechanical and aerospace engineering challenge, it becomes a civil engineering challenge. In fact, we hire civil engineers, contract them out to help us out with some of those challenges. And that's just because that's the nature of having much larger structures and engines. And um, I still harken back to you look at other companies, how much they've had to put into a 5,000 pound thrust engine. You're still an order of magnitude difference in terms of what we've spent to develop that capability and demonstrate full duration burns. It's one thing we burn it for like 5 or 10 seconds, which you always have to start there. But it's another thing for that engine to burn for its full duty cycle and survive. Uh, to me, that is one of the most salient demonstrations of incredible capital efficiency is an engine that produces for 60 seconds up to 20,000 pounds of thrust. Um, and what it can then do in the marketplace, it was what becomes very interesting. Uh, and one of those things was, of course, powering hypersonics, which was never our original intention, but that is one of the many things that solid rocket motors do today.
Yeah.
And so, um, yeah, it's coming to see our test facility, seeing, I've had the opportunity to go visit NASA Marshall Space Flight Center, which, man, that is such a heritage site to rocket development, since World
Yeah.
War II. But some of our test stands now, this is there are test stands there that are absolutely amazing, meant to handle like engine tests. They're in the millions of pounds of thrust, but our test stand firmly sits not in the lower end of the test stands you see at Marshall Space Flight Center. And so we've developed a formidable capability that not only services us, but we've actually lent out our test stand to universities in our region who need to test out small liquid rocket engines. Uh, People that we hope someday will become future aerospace mechanical engineering hires for our company.
Yeah.
So we got to get people here. I've got to show them, come by and visit, and
All
I'll
right.
give you a tour.
All right, last question. As you're thinking about the really the next phase of growth, what does the potential additional capital unlock that excites you, excites the team over the next, I don't know, 6, 12, 36 months?
Yeah, at the core of it, it gets us to commercialization. It gets us to take this test version of our engine, ultimately make the flight version, test it out, and fly it, and generate at least $1.1 million for each one of those flights or each one of those engines we sell to be used in flight. Uh, so now that is going to require a number of sources of investment. So one, private capital, but we also have matching capital from a state institution called Maine Technology Institute, up to $2 million, which we can leverage for capital expenditures, and then just the revenue from our hypersonics customer and partner. So I think one of the things I really want to share is like what we're excited about for this next test. So we have this is a perfect example of me announcing something and
Yeah.
just being upfront and sincere, and then a week later there's a change to it. So we have decided that our very next test, we're inserting an iteration in there. We're going to run the engine at its current power rating, but we were making some. Oh gosh, I wish I could. This part I can't tell just from an IP standpoint, but what you'll see is our white Marvel engine cylinder. But what you won't see is if you had an X-ray machine, all that's going to go on inside that engine. Uh, there are some phenomenally creative changes to the engine that will make this next test exceedingly interesting.
Yeah,
But in short, it'll improve the performance even more, and we think is a technically pivotal hurdle and milestone to hit as we move to do an engine test for our hypersonics customer, Spectre Aerospace.
that's exciting. So they
Yes.
heard it here first. But we have an upcoming test. We'll announce the date here shortly, and it's all a result of the people that have believed in the journey so far. And I think that is a testament to your grit, the team's determination, and the ability to continue to create milestones, hit them, exceed them, and look to the next chapter and next opportunity. So it's really neat to be on this journey with you.
Thank you, Justin. I really appreciate the opportunity to share it with folks.
On behalf of my guest today, Sascha Deri, the CEO and founder of bluShift Aerospace, you've been listening to our commercial pathway and hearing more about what we've done with the capital that's been invested so far and all that is to come. So on behalf of my guest today, thanks for watching.